Demon Slayer relationships explained. Shipping. Whether you love to speculate about potential romances or you can't stand the thought, you're bound to run across it sometime in any anime fandom. And Demon Slayer, with its plethora of canon romantic relationships, is absolutely no exception. But as we're going to get into today, there's actually nothing random about it, and if you got your shipper goggles on, the evidence was right under our noses long before we knew who was going to end up with who. So let's get into it. In a world where life or death threats are a dime a dozen, how did our favorite Demon Slayers find time for romance? Zenitsu and Nezuko. On the point of finding time for romance, one thing I'll say about that right off the bat is there is definitely one member of the Demon Slayer core who never has a problem finding time to think about matters of the heart, and that is of course Zenitsu Agatsuma. He is smitten with Nezuko from their first meeting, even going so far as to give Tanjiro an earful, as he believes that he has been hauling a cute girlfriend all around the countryside without informing his companions. One thing he doesn't seem to be afraid of at first is proclaiming his undying love for Nezuko-chan. And that never really changes. But what might have left fans scratching their heads is how on earth Nezuko came to feel the same way. After all, when they had their fateful first meeting, she was still a demon, and she doesn't seem to think much of the boy she refers to as Weird Dandelion. So what changed? Well, a lot. But it all happened very gradually. Nezuko first starts to warm up to her would-be paramour when she and her brother Tanjiro are recovering from the beating they took at Mount Natagumo, as he takes to sitting with Nezuko and telling her what Tanjiro has been up to all day. Though still a demon, she seems responsive to these stories, giving us our first implication that she likes Zenitsu's company too. But while Zenitsu's attempts at declaring his love for Nezuko are many, we're not really sure if she's aware of them. That sure would be a barrier on her returning his feelings, but luckily for Loverboy, we later see that she might just have held on to her memories of the many times Zenitsu tried to woo her while she was a demon. In fact, when she becomes a human again, she remembers the time that Zenitsu had given her flowers, something she would have had no reason to hold on to if her earlier impressions of Zenitsu hadn't been positive. We later get a hint that the relationship might have progressed when we learn that after Gu showers Nezuko in gifts as a thank you for mending his beloved Haori, Zenitsu begins to feel rather threatened and considers him a romantic rival. That kinda seems like a boyfriend thing to me, so I think it's likely that they've become closer at that point, and that Nezuko has begun to reciprocate his feelings a little bit more. And though we don't see a whole lot of their actual courtship, we do know that they married and had children whose distant descendants, Toko and Yoshiteru, appear in the manga's final chapter. This is perhaps the least surprising relationship to come out of Demon Slayer since, well, Zenitsu hasn't exactly been quiet about his feelings for Nezuko, like ever, even if it took a while to get off the ground. But before we get into that, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on to never miss an upload, and smash that like button for some plot armor today. Tanjiro and Kano. Nezuko was not the only Kamado sibling whose romance was a long time coming. One of the series' other endgame relationships was that of protagonist Tanjiro Kamado and his fellow Demon Slayer Kanao Tsuyuri, and it could not have been more difficult in its development than the previous couple. When Kanao and Tanjiro meet early in the series, they don't start off on a good foot, as Kanao has been ordered to kill Nezuko on Mount Natagumo. But by the time they reunite at the Butterfly Mansion after the battle, Tanjiro has seemingly forgotten all about Kanao's early aggression and allows her to aid in his rehabilitation. But there's a little problem. When it comes to socializing, Kanao is a little bit hampered by her indecisiveness. Due to her traumatic past, she can't make decisions on her own, so she flips a coin to choose what to do, something Tanjiro becomes curious about at the Butterfly Mansion. This obstacle actually allows them to have one of their first major relationship developments when Tanjiro encourages her to follow her heart instead of using a coin toss. Kanao is understandably a little shocked by this turn of events and by Tanjiro's boundless enthusiasm, but it's one that has a significant effect on the course of her life. And after she's seen blushing at Tanjiro's words, we get the sense that she might actually like that. A bonus chapter about Kanao's past takes that blush a little bit further, showing a memory of something Kanae Kocho had told her about how developing feelings for someone can help Kanao come into her own. The flashback ends with a shot of Tanjiro to imply that he might be the person Kanae thought would change Kanao's mind. Finally, we get further confirmation of her warm rapport with Tanjiro when she is relieved to see him on the mend after his tussle with an upper rank in the entertainment district. So although we definitely get the sense early on that Tanjiro and Kanao might have feelings for one another, we get our strongest sense of this development at the very end of the series. During their battle with Muzan, both are more than worse for wear, but Tanjiro still risks his life to carry an injured Kanao to safety. And Kanao returns that favor when Tanjiro is turned into a demon, shedding tears of distress when he attacks his sister and putting herself in harm's way to give him the antidote that will make him a human again. They share a a tearful expression of relief after he becomes a human, a demonstration of their care for one another and the rapport they had been building all this time. That ending is the clearest indicator we get of what Kanao and Tanjiro mean to each other. For one, Kanao's actions parallel the way that Tanjiro altered the course of her life just by encouraging her not to limit her decision making to the results of a coin toss. It may not have been life or death, but for Kanao, that moment was pivotal, totally changing the way she looks at the world, and she too got the chance to help Tanjiro at an important moment. They may not have a ton of screen time together, but narrative choices are intentional, and anybody could have delivered that antidote. Granted, Kano had the antidote because of her connection to Shinobu, and gave it to Tanjiro because she was in the best condition at the time, but there were several more people who cared deeply for Tanjiro and could have made a heroic last stand to turn Tanjiro back. But the fact that the story was structured as to make Kanao the person to deliver the antidote is not accidental, and the parallel that decision creates, while not explicitly romantic, definitely makes their eventual relationship seem less random. We don't know much about their future together, but we do know that they married and had children whose descendants, Kanata and Sumihiko Kamado, we see in the epilogue. Though their slow burn romance is as in your face as Zenitsu's love confessions, we get plenty of hints along the way, so it's not too surprising when we learn that the descendants live on to the present day. Inosuke and Aoi. Okay, full disclosure, this is a relationship that I thought was a little bit bonkers when I first read the manga. I mean, find me two people who seem less likely to fall for each other than a stern hall monitor type and a boy who wears a boar's head and would probably fight Hashira for fun. That said, I'll do my best to try and explain how it came about, as sometimes opposites most definitely attract. Much like Kano and Tanjiro, Inosuke and Aoi meet at the Butterfly Mansion after the Mount Natsugumo fight leaves Inosuke in need of some R&R. The no-nonsense Aoi oversees Inosuke's recovery training, which aggravates her overly competitive charge. Doesn't really seem like much of a basis for a love story, but it apparently does endear him to Aoi, because when he returns to her after the Entertainment District mission, she is deeply upset to see him in such sorry shape. However, she's none too happy to realize that her tears have been in vain when she finds him on the ceiling seconds after expressing her worry, a reactionary characteristic of their annoying and annoyed relationship dynamic. Suffice to say that her future husband is a difficult patient. But oddly enough, it's actually Inosuke who has given no indication of his feeling anything towards Aoi until after the battle with Muzan. While he's recovering, Aoi catches Inosuke trying to steal food and chastises him, telling him not to steal because he can have however much food he wants as long as he eats from a tray made specifically for him. And well, they do say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. This is certainly a gesture that raises Aoi in his estimation, establishing them on slightly more even ground than before. Even so, I will admit that this is probably one of the more perplexing ships that come out of Demon Slayer. They have a great-grandson, Aoba Hashibira, but not enough screen time together for me to understand why they ended up together. While a battle shonen can't really devote much time to romantic development, I did feel like too much of Inosuke and Aoi's development was off-screen for it to really make sense. Tanjiro and Kanao show that a relationship does not have to have a ton of spotlight to make sense at the end of the day if the narrative is structured right, but this is not one of those instances. I don't think it totally came out of nowhere, but I just wanted a little more than I got from them. But all that aside, there's one romance in Demon Slayer where not enough is not a complaint I think anyone would ever make, and that's where we're headed next. Tengen and his 3 wives. Tengen Uzui, as befitting a character who practically seems designed to be simp for, has one of few relationships that are in full swing before the time skip at the end, with not one, but 3 wives: Suma, Makio, and Hinetsuru. It's explained in a Taisho Rumors Extra that every man in Tengen Shinobi clan is given 3 compatible wives chosen by the clan when he turns 15, which is how the flashiest Hashira came into such a flashy living arrangement. Later, when he left his family behind, he took his wives with him, and they remained by his side throughout the series. He later retires with them after losing an arm in the Entertainment District battle, and has at least 1 child and a descendant named Tenma Uzui, an Olympic gymnast who has 7 siblings. They're already married by the time we meet them, so there's not much relationship development to talk about since we don't see any of it. But we do know that Tengen cares deeply about his wives, telling them that their lives are of a higher priority than the mission when they embark on their Entertainment District assignment. Some like Rengoku and Zenitsu might think that he has too many wives, but it seems to be working out pretty well for the Uzui harem, unlike the next couple who don't have it easy, Obanai and Matsuri. And now to transition from one of Demon Slayer's happiest endings to by far its most tragic. We all love a pair of star-crossed lovers, and in this series, that role belongs to Snake Ashira Obanai Iguro and Love Ashira Mitsuri Kanroji, popularly referred to as Obamitsu by fans. They are so beloved that they are even given a cameo in a chapter of a totally unrelated shoujo manga called Fly Me to the Moon. This makes no sense to me, but hey, they deserve it. But how exactly did they get to be such a well-loved ship? To answer that question, we have to start with the fact that neither of these two came from a place that made romance particularly easy for them. Matsuri, whose muscle mass is 8 times denser than the average person and has an appetite to match, was rejected by her fiancé several years before the start of the series because he found her to be too strange. After that, she was unsure whether or not she would ever be seen as lovable because of her strength, appetite, and strange hair color. She then resolves to find a man stronger than herself to marry and joins the Demon Slayer Corps in the hopes of doing so. And Obanai had it worse. His family kept a snake-like demon that they planned to feed him to when he came of age, and he feels as if he cannot confess his feelings because of the evil bloodline he descends from. Nevertheless, for Iguro, it is love at first sight. He is smitten with Matsuri from the get-go, even giving her the striped socks that she wears so she'd feel less self-conscious about her uniform. Though we don't see a lot of either one of them before the final battle, they are frequently mentioned in the supplementary material, with many insights on the relationship in the fan books and volume extras. And when Stone Hashira Gyome Himejima is asked what he thinks of each of the Hashira, he points out how much the two of them seem to like each other. So clearly they weren't subtle about their feelings for each other. We learned that they enjoy eating together and exchange frequent letters. Definitely both things that would strengthen their bond. However, none of that is shown in the main manga since there isn't a ton of time to devote to the relationship of two supporting characters, no matter how much shippers might have wished for more moments. The real heavy lifting for this ship is done in the final battle against Muzan. After Matsuri is fatally injured, Obanai can't focus on either attacking or defending and instead stops fighting to get her to safety. This speaks volumes about his concern for her in the midst of a battle this pivotal. Unable to rejoin the fight, Matsuri begs Obanai to come back alive, which he does only long enough for the two to say a proper goodbye. And a proper goodbye is exactly what they get. After the battle, when it becomes clear that neither of them are going to survive their injuries, we see Obanai holding a bloodied Matsuri as they reflect on the past and make a few final confessions. Obanai recalls their first meeting when Matsuri got lost at the Ubeshiki mansion and he helped her find her way, saying that meeting a normal girl like her at that point in his life saved him. He expresses his admiration and his gratitude for the time they spent together. She, in turn, confesses her love for Obanai and asks if he would marry her in the next life, a proposal he accepts. Having said all of this, they die in each other's arms. Though Obanai and Matsuri aren't main characters and thus get less screen time together, there can be little doubt as to the nature of the relationship after an ending like that. And sure enough, we see that they have kept their promise. In the time skip ending, their reincarnations are married with 5 children and running a snake-themed restaurant. And honestly, I can't imagine Matsuri and Obanai wanting any other ending. Akaza and Koyuki. Another relationship we can't discount was that of Akaza, the upper rank 3 demon, and his fiancée Koyuki, back when he was still a human. Their tragic story cemented Akaza's status as a fan favorite for many, but since he's already got a whole video to himself, you can learn more about his doomed romance by clicking the card or the link in the description. What might have been. In addition to those ones, there are more than a few Demon Slayer relationships that never got past the subtle hints phase. Though never officially romantic, these relationships were hinted at similarly to these ships that did become canon, so they weren't mentioned here. Tamayo and Yushiro. We all know the sting of unrequited love, and Yushiro, Lady Tamayo's demon assistant, knows it better than most. She took him in as a child when he was ill, and though we don't know how his infatuation with Tamayo arose, it is easy enough to imagine where that might have come from. However, Tamayo isn't really in the market for a new partner after killing her husband and children shortly after Muzan turned her into a demon, something she has lived to regret. And that definitely kept her from considering her traveling companion as a potential romantic prospect. He never seems to get over this though, taking up painting in the modern era so we can continue to immortalize Tamayo through art. Tough luck, Yushiro. Gyu and Shinobu. Okay, this one's nowhere near canon, but since the shipping inclined side of the fandom seems to love them together, I'm going to get into some of the reasons why that might be the case. Now, before you brandish your pitchforks, I do have reasons for saying this. For one, Gyu and Shinobu get quite a bit of screen time together in both the main series and the supplementary material. In the first light novel, Shinobu is one of the only Ashira willing to defend Gyu, when the other pillars want to outcast him in spite of his aloof behavior. Then, in a Gyu-centric one-shot, they collaborate on a mission even though Shinobu isn't on duty, and eat dinner together. Something the socially aloof Gyu probably would not do with just anyone. And Gyome, back at it again with the ship hints, notes in the fan book that they enjoy spending time together. They have positive things to say about each other in their own evaluations too. Even if Gyu appears ambivalent towards Shinobu in her enjoyment of teasing him, he is visibly shocked to learn that she has died, a show of emotion that is rare for the stoic water Ashira. It's easy not to read that as romantic, and many don't, but it seems pretty reflective of some of the ways other ships were teased, so I'm not going to discount the possibility that it was meant that way. But the other reason I bring this up is because it draws an interesting parallel with another non-canon ship, that of Sanemi Shinazugawa and Shinobu's older sister Kanae. Though Kanae is long dead by the beginning of the series and we don't see much of her, flashbacks indicate that the two had a good relationship. Kanae seems less fazed by his lack of tact than the other pillars, while Sanemi expresses admiration for Kanae's gentleness and blushes at the mention of her. And Gyomei, champion of non-canon ships everywhere, knows that Sanemi seems to like Kanae. Not much basis for a romance, true, but it does bring up an interesting point when compared to Gyu and Shinobu's relationship. Gyu and Sanemi are both not particularly well liked by their colleagues, both survived the final battle with Muzan, and both may or may not have had a thing for one of the tragically deceased Kocho sisters. While I highly doubt that was intentional, I think it's kinda cool that something like that connected the two surviving Hashira. It makes me more inclined to think that in a world where Kanae and Shinobu didn't meet such tragic ends, there might have been room for something to have happened, but since again, everything about those relationships is so ambiguous, we'll never really know. And I don't know anyone who would call Demon Slayer a love story, but even so, it can be pretty fun to break down romantic storylines and manage to squeeze their way in past all the high stakes action. After all, there's no more classic shonen trope than the time skip happily ever after. But what do you think about these relationships? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.